I will call the November 10th meeting of the Traffic and Parking Advisory Board meeting to order. Good afternoon. The Traffic and Parking Advisory Board reviews items of interest regarding parking and traffic items. We are an advisory board, and our favorable recommendation today goes before the Oshkosh Common Council. The council can either accept or reject any recommendation from this board. If you don't agree with our decision, you can discuss the item with any council member. If the board does not recommend an item, a common council member may sponsor a new ordinance regarding that same item. All items do require two readings before the common council. The first reading will take place on Tuesday, November 24th, Tuesday before Thanksgiving at 6 p.m., and you will be allowed to comment on the item at that time through their process, although they will take no action at that time. On Tuesday, December 8th at 6 p.m., again through the process of the Common Council, the item will be on a second reading, at which time the council will in fact take action. You will again be allowed to speak at that time. Can I get the roll called for quorum purposes, please?
Staple,
Here.
Shazinski, Krause,
Here.
Schneider,
Here.
Becker,
Here.
Christensen.
Here.
All right. I do want to go through just a couple of housekeeping details. And Mr. Collins, please, if I omit anything, this is my first time chairing a virtual meeting in the official capacity. But there are a few things that were pointed out throughout the city IT staff and open meetings laws. So if you bear with me for just a second so that we can actually get taken care of. It is asked that you mute yourself when you're not speaking so as to minimize the amount of ambient noise. If you do have something you'd like to add to the conversation, please signify your willingness to speak by wave of the hand. If I don't see it, I'm hoping I can count on you, Mr. Collins, to point it out.
Sure.
So unless you're speaking, I would ask that only Mr. Collins and myself be unmuted, quote unquote, so that we can communicate in case I miss one or he misses one. Once you've been called upon to speak, drop your hand so that everybody knows that you're speaking. Again, if there is a member of the public, and I don't believe there is at this point, Collins.
It doesn't look like it.
Okay. Well, then if there is one at some point, they're going to miss this opportunity, but we'll take care of that in a minute. But they'll be asked again, as is always the case, to state their name and address for the record. Please be mindful of any distractions that might come into play in your kitchen, dining room, spare bedroom, basement, wherever you happen to be at the moment. Not that I don't enjoy seeing someone's cat or dog, but probably not the opportunity at this time and place. Anything I missed, Mr. Collins, that you're aware of?
No, I think there's, you can also raise your hand. It should, like right next to your name on the participant list. So there's like a hand, so you can click on that and then we'll see it on the screen that your hand's raised. So you can do that as well as, just kind of signify if you're on the video. But if you're not on the video, then obviously we can't see you. But,
true. I
yeah.
do see there are a few of us that are phone only.
Yep. But other than that, I think that's pretty much everything.
Okay.
Just a reminder that all the voting's roll call voting, which we've already done.
Yep.
So yeah, I think we're good.
Looks like Mr. Staple has a question about not seeing the hand. If you could guide him, Mr. Collins.
Yeah, if you look at the your name on the participant list, like when you hover over your name, there's a hand right next to it, and then if you hover over that, it'll say raise hand. Otherwise, if that doesn't work and you're just on audio only, you can type in the chat box and then you can see that as well.
Okay. Are you good with that, Mr. Staple? You have to unmute if you want to say something, Jim.
Yeah. Yes, I am.
Okay.
I think what you're seeing is just in the moderator's screen, maybe.
Okay. Yeah, it should be on there, but that's fine. I mean, we can get around it. So if you want to speak either you're on auto only, just type it in the chat box. That'd be just as well, I think.
All right, then housekeeping issues aside, the first item on the agenda is approval of minutes. Need a second.
Second.
Does anyone have any comments, questions, additions, or deletions to the minutes?
Dan, this is Jane. I didn't hear the first.
The approval of minutes. That was mine. So the
Okay.
second was, who was second on that?
I think it might have been Jake.
That was Jake.
Was it Jake? Again, it's so hard to keep track. Did everyone see Mr. Robbie's comment there about the hand raising? That being said, any comments, questions, additions, or deletions on the minutes? Seeing none, I will ask for approval of minutes.
Staple,
Aye.
Shazinski, Krause,
Aye.
Wanschneider,
Aye.
Becker,
Aye,
Christensen.
Aye.
which then brings us to new business, or excuse me, old business. I don't believe there is any, Mr. Collins.
No.
Okay. Which again, as I was saying, brings us to new business, board vacancy.
Yeah, I just want to let everybody know, for anyone watching this, we do have one board vacancy. So if anybody's interested, you can contact either the mayor or the city manager's office. So our newest member, unfortunately, made a couple meetings, but then she said it just wasn't going to work into her schedule. So she actually ended up resigning from, I think she was on another board that she resigned from. So
I don't know. I know it's she.
one availability.
I don't even remember another lady other than
Again, keep yourself muted if you're not the one speaking to the group. Thank you. If everybody could pass that message along to those that they may interact with in this situation we all find ourselves in, which then brings us to the third item, which is the Jackson Street Corridor Plan and Safety Study, which is going to be the meat of our meeting today, I would assume.
Yep. So this is kind of the main event. I will try to share my screen. And I'll just give, I believe most of you were able to attend the workshop, which was the week before Halloween. So as you know, we have the Community Development Department in partnership with the Engineering Department as well as the Transportation Department all worked together, and this was at a request of the Jackson Street Neighborhood Association. We had a put together a request for proposal and went out for proposals to do basically a two-step study. Step one was the a corridor plan from Back Avenue, and then the second part of that study was to do a traffic safety analysis from on Jackson Street from Murdoch to Church. And the goals, and that's basically what we're going to be focusing on here. The goals of that study address some of the neighborhood's concerns regarding speed and traffic calming, noise, things that could potentially help pedestrian crossings in that area. So that was the goal of the request for proposal. As a result of that RFP, Ayers and Associates, in conjunction with another company called RDG, were selected to lead that study. The study has taken place over the last, it's coming to its conclusion now with the neighborhood workshops, and then board, and then it will be discussed at the Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Board meeting, which I believe is on Thursday, and then also with the Plan Commission. And so each of the board's recommendations will then go to the Common Council, where they will discuss and possibly take action at their meeting on December, I believe it's December 8th, but it's the first meeting in December of the council. So that's kind of where we're at. And I know that everybody on this call participated in that workshop. So I won't, I'll stay going through the whole presentation. But I will give you a brief synopsis. I don't know if, can you see like the PowerPoint on your screen? Okay. So if you can see that, I'll just briefly, it's hard for me to tell what you can see and what you can't, but I'll just give you, I'm not going to go through obviously this whole presentation or anything like that, because you've already seen this. But just for anybody in the public or anybody that's viewing it on TV, just to kind of give you a brief synopsis of what the traffic board tonight, what we're hoping is, I'm going to basically go through, they made they laid out 3 improvement options. There's actually 4, one being do nothing, which is always an option. So I'm just going to go through those real quickly so you know what the options we're discussing are. So we have option 1, which is leave Jackson Street the way it is, which is a 4-lane divided highway, 2 lanes in each direction. It was reconstructed to that around the year 2000 by the Wisconsin Department of Transportation. As it's connecting Highway 45. So that's what we currently have. In order to address some of the neighborhood and public concerns, Ayers and Associates did the traffic portion of this study, and they came up with 3 potential alternatives. And option 1 would be to maintain the existing cross section from Church to Murdoch, and then it had some improvements with speed feedback signs. And then options 2, there was option A and B. Option A being a full redesign from Church to Hobbs with a 2-way left turn lane, so a center turn lane, so it'd be similar to Murdoch between Algoma and Jackson. And then their third option would be to do partial redesign. So that would be from Church Avenue to New York, would be to reconfigure the street to that 3 lanes, 1 lane in each direction with a center shared left turn lane. And then from New York to Murdoch to maintain the existing cross section. So I will just quickly go through a couple of slides, and then we can have some discussion here. Let's see if I can get this moving here. Okay. So, oh, this is really slow to move. Okay, option 1 is to maintain the existing cross section, and we would add some speed feedback signs. These have been proven to be effective to make drivers aware of their speed, and it usually helps reduce the speed and has a traffic calming impact. So basically we would have 1 speed on the entry into the corridor. So 1 near one near Murdoch, and then one in each direction in the middle. So that would be option A, or improvement option A, they call it. And then the summary, they provided a summary here of the benefits and drawbacks. The benefits were that would maintain a higher traffic capacity, so basically means that you can get more traffic through there more efficiently, quicker. Reduce backups at signalized intersections. The drawbacks would be the speed reduction wouldn't be as great as the safety benefits, a full redesign. There wouldn't be the opportunity for as many pedestrian accommodations. A couple other things the residents were concerned about was snow storage and noise, so there would be no change. Option 2A, which if we remember was the full road design, which would be one travel in each direction with the center two-way left turn lane. And that would also include the speed feedback signs. We would also do paint some crosswalks and install some RRFBs. So what those are the pedestrian beacons, that the yellow flashing lights, for instance, at Summit in Congress, where you push the button, flashes yellow to alert motorists to be alert for a pedestrian in the crossing. And then they also had recommended some curb bump outs. So what that would do would extend the curbs near some of the crossings and intersections to make, again, it would slow traffic a little bit, and it would also decrease some of the pedestrian crossing distance. Just showing so the full roadway redesign would go from, it would start here near Stanley Avenue and go all the way down to Church. We don't really have to get into the details, but they're just showing where some of those things would be, some of the additional crosswalks and the speed feedback signs, and just giving an idea of what the road layout might look like. I believe there are a couple slides there. The other benefit to a full road redesign like this is that we'd be able to add left turn lanes at the signalized intersections. Currently, as you know, there's 2 lanes in each direction, so there isn't a dedicated left turn lane. As the board knows, the dedicated left turn lanes with this condition would be in a safety, because you would only need to cross 1 lane of traffic to make that left turn. And I believe they have an illustration of that. Okay, well, this is showing the high visibility crosswalk additions, which again would potentially have those flashing beacons, as well as we would use what's considered the continental crosswalk style of painting, which basically is the bold lines that are more visible to pedestrians than the traditional ladder, or not ladder, but parallel line crosswalks that you see at most intersections. We generally use these, you can see, use those type of crosswalk markings at mid-block crossings. So these would be mid-block crossings, so it'd be a good application for those. And they've been shown to be more visible for drivers. And then here they're showing where potentially you could have some curb bump outs, which, as I said, would reduce the crossing distance for pedestrians as well as tame traffic. The next one here, that's just showing the RRB. And just to finish my thought on the left turns, generally, like at New York Avenue in Jackson, as we've discussed with the board over the years, that was a higher crash intersection. And the reason for that is when you're turning left and you have 2 lanes of traffic coming to cross, it's hard to see the curb lane. If you have an opposing left turning vehicle, oftentimes you can't see around that vehicle to see a vehicle that may be coming in the curb lane. So we did install the no left turns during peak hours about a year and a half ago, and crashes have went down drastically since we did that. So we have seen a benefit with that safety improvement. So the option 2A, the full road benefits of that option are reduced traffic speeds, improved safety, increased pedestrian crossing accommodations, increased snow storage, and reduced roadway noise. The drawbacks are you'll have reduced reserve traffic capacity, so you won't be able to move as many vehicles as smoothly and efficiently as you can with 2 lanes in each direction. And I know we've talked with the board over the years. A concern with that is, it is alternative Highway 41. Talking with the public safety folks, generally we only have to implement that once or twice a year, but that is something worth bringing up, that during those 1 or 2 times, obviously traffic would not flow as efficiently if we didn't have 4 lanes. But option 2B is the partial roadway redesign. And this kind of came out of some concerns that, as you know from the presentation, that there is a higher traffic volume near the roundabout at Murdoch. And then the traffic drops precipitously as you get towards Church Avenue. So the traffic volume is highest near that roundabout. So there was some concern about the traffic volume between New York and Murdoch and being able to efficiently handle that. So this is an option as well, where from New York to Murdoch, you keep the 2 lanes in each direction. Then from Church to New York, you implement the road redesign with the 1 lane in each direction. Again, we would have the high visibility crosswalks and the curb bump outs. And you'll see similar benefits and drawbacks. The drawback with this action, you have basically most of the benefits from 2A, other than the stretch from Murdoch to New York. So that's where the drawback is. The speed and safety benefits would be limited to South and New York. And okay, this then shows you that the 3 different options and the evaluation they did. If it was a higher positive impact, a moderate positive impact, or a lower positive impact, and then the cost as well. And then towards the end of the summary, the consultants recommended option 2A, which would be the full roadway redesign with the 2A left turn lanes. So that's just a real quick synopsis of basically what was a couple-hour joint workshop a couple of weeks ago. And like I said, everybody on this call, I believe, participated. So everybody is pretty familiar with where we're at. So with that, I'll open it up to Dan to lead the discussion.
Thank you, Jim. Just a quick question, if I might. Curb bump outs. Do you have an example somewhere nearby that you can point us to in terms of what it looks like?
I will ask James if he knows anything. I'll think about it, but James might know off the top of his head.
There are some types of curb bump outs at the intersection of Melvin and Hazel near Webster Stanley. There was a couple of one type of a bump out there. I believe, let's see, Hickory's got some traffic humps, but I don't remember if there's any. There might be a mid-block bump out there. Another perfect example of bump outs, North Main Street. All of the mid-block pedestrian crossings on North Main Street downtown all have curb bump outs to get the pedestrians out, even with nearby parked cars, so you can see traffic. So there's another example of some curb bump outs in those areas.
I think we're all familiar with the curb bump outs on North Main, but my question was specific to the ones on the corners, as it looks like it's going to be laid out here. Is that in fact true?
I believe Jim, most of these were laid out at corners, which would be similar to Melvin and Hazel over at by Webster Stanley. That is an intersection bump outs there.
Yep, that's correct.
So inevitably, then my follow-up question is, how often do we have to replace the stop sign at the corner of Melvin and Hazel? And how beat up does that curb cutout get because people cut it off and hop the curb?
I think from a damage standpoint to the curb, it's more likely that my own snowplow drivers will cause damage than other traveling public. And they usually learn after the first time they run into it where it is and not to do that again. We also put little locator posts out there on those to help them try to avoid that. And typically on intersections like that, we have 12-inch curb head anyhow, so they're able to withstand a little more abuse than a typical 6-inch curb head.
Thank you for the question or for the answer. Anyone else have any questions for Mr. Collins or Mr. Robbie?
I have a question. Bill Christensen. I guess I'm not seeing the advantage of that bump out. I don't see what that's going to gain as far as safety, or I see it just as more of an impediment for the, let's say, the snow removal and so on.
James, you can chime in if you want, but I know what the consultants basically the reason for the curb bump outs is it reduces the distance that pedestrians have to cross, so inevitably makes that safer. And then B, the other thing it does is it narrows the roadway, so it does. So basically it slows traffic down because it's gonna feel narrower, so you're inevitably gonna slow down. So those are the two main benefits. Was it enhances the pedestrian crossing and it helps slow traffic down because generally if you're driving down a wide 4-lane road, you're gonna feel like you can go faster. If you see that the road's narrow, you're inevitably gonna slow down. It creates a little bit of I want to say choke points, but that's not really what it is because you can still flow. But as a motor, you're thinking, okay, well, everyone's narrow, so I'm slower.
Yeah, that's really it, Jim. It's by creating a visually narrowed road, it creates the psychological effect of slowing traffic down, and then it does shorten the crossing distance for pedestrians, so they're in the actual street for a shorter distance. I don't know, Alexa, if you have anything you want to add on the pedestrian side of it.
I was going to say the same thing. So it does help pedestrians cross more safely because it reduces the distance of the roadway.
Anyone else with a question? Otherwise, I have one. All right, Mr. Collins, what's roughly the peak travel times, and particularly the section from Church to Murdoch on Jackson?
Generally, it's pretty consistent with peak hours, which are 7 to 8 in the morning, and then in the afternoon, it's generally between 4 and 6. I could look it up specific. Actually, they have that in the report, but that's generally what it is 7 till 8, 8:30, and then in the afternoon is 4 to 6.
So we're talking about 3 hours a day, 4 hours a day when traffic's at its heaviest, which is also when I would assume most of the speed excesses are happening, unless Lieutenant Harris can tell me otherwise. I would believe that to be the case.
That would be my assumption, but yeah, I don't know. Yeah, you can chime in, Matt.
Yep. Can you repeat it though? My radio went off. Sorry.
Said I assume most of the speed excesses that occur on that roadway happen during peak travel times, 7 to 8 in the morning and 4 to 6 in the afternoon.
I would say that's probably true, although I have talked to several residents recently that say it's, all times of day. Depends on the weather, things like that. But obviously, as there's more traffic volume, we see to have, some of those higher speeds, busier times of the day.
Okay.
Ross or Bill, do you have any insight on that, given you live right there?
Yes, Ross. Yes, it takes place all through the day. It's not just during peak times.
And I would say sometimes when the traffic is lighter, the traffic is faster.
I did take the opportunity to ask a question of Mr. Collins prior to the meeting a few days back. My preference, honestly, in this matter is to leave things as is, particularly on the section from Church to Jackson, because going through the expense of and the confusion that we're going to impose on the community by doing complete, even a partial reconstruction on that stretch of roadway is not real beneficial from my perspective on a cost benefit analysis. The question I asked Mr. Collins a while back was related to, and again, if you've got some insight here, Lieutenant Harris, I'd certainly love to hear it, is putting an extra enforcement position into play along that stretch of roadway, particularly during peak times of the day. Any thought, any feedback on that, Lieutenant Harris?
Yeah, I mean, you're just talking about not a specific officer, but you're just saying when available and kind of planned details.
In a perfect world, I would like, and I know this is near impossible, but I would like to get the traffic enforcement position reinforced or re-implemented here in the city, but I'll take what I can get, because I think by putting an officer in that neighborhood, particularly during peak times, solves most of the problems we're trying to solve. It'll reduce the noise. It'll certainly reduce the speed. Just seen a squad parked on a side street near Jackson. You can attest to this better than anybody on this meeting. We'll drop speeds considerably on that roadway.
Yep. So, I guess I can't really comment on a traffic enforcement team a little out of my area, but from a shift level perspective, we obviously first and second shift are during the day, and we see those higher traffic volume times. Our motorcycle patrols would routinely be in that area, and then having our district officers. It kind of covers a couple different districts, but I know our district sergeants have kind of made that a traffic enforcement. We call it selective traffic enforcement, to have the officers kind of get out there, document those times. One of the things we've seen, though, is even if we do have an officer out there for an hour today or an officer out there for an hour tomorrow, it doesn't fix the problem. I mean, there's still going to be a speeder the next day and the next day and the next day. So we could go out there all day, every day, and unless you're out there all day, every day, it doesn't fix the speed. It addresses the speeder. It doesn't necessarily address the overall problem.
Not the grapevine, though, solve that problem for you over the course of a short period of time?
Ross, the road design automatically helps what we're trying to get to, and that's the speeding vehicles. What we also have to consider is something besides the car speed. We have to consider the safety of the people that live up and down Jackson Street. You have how many? You got 148 driveways that people are trying to get into and out of. And because there's a difference in the elevation between roadbed and driveways, you have to almost stop to get turned into your driveway. This is something that you have to do every day, and it exists from one end, from Church to Murdoch, and it's a safety in other aspects rather than just the speeding cars. It helps in snow removal too. I mean, that's an issue too of safety. And so we're dealing with more than just the speed of cars.
As I stated, Ross, it solves most of the problems. That would be the one it doesn't, in my vision, doesn't solve. The unfortunate thing is that it creates additional problems. And again, I wanted to get some input from both Mr. Collins and Lieutenant Harris. You mentioned, Jim, that it only happens once or twice a year, meaning the shutdown of 41 at Jackson and the reroute of traffic through town. Twice doesn't sound like much, but if it goes on for hours, that becomes, in my mind, a huge problem. Any insight as to how long those occurrences typically last?
Yeah, I'll let Lieutenant Harris answer to that. He probably has a better perspective, but I did look up peak hour and I was close. The peak hour is 7:15 to 8:15 a.m. and 4 to 5 p.m. But yeah, Lieutenant Harris, I don't know if you probably have some recollection of how often Highway 41 may get closed. And the issue with that is that and it's just, the main issue is the bridge. So if you can't get over the Butamore Bridge, you can't divert traffic down Algoma because it's too close to the bridge. So basically, the only other north-south route that makes sense is to send them down Jackson. But Lieutenant Harris, do you know about how often that happens, or do you have an estimate?
Yep, I don't have exact numbers, but I can think of one time in probably the last 5 years that the Butamore Bridge was shut down, and Jackson Street became that main corridor. Traffic actually moved pretty well. It was actually in the winter, but where the hangup came up was semis going northbound at the Jackson Murdoch roundabout, because the semis needed both lanes to make that roundabout, and cars weren't letting semis through. So our plan for the future, we would staff that Jackson Murdoch roundabout to basically stop cars, get semis through, and keep traffic moving. My experience has been when the old Butamore Bridge, that would have more crashes, it'd have more shutdowns. With the new redesign of that bridge, it has happened less frequently. I guess unofficially, it has happened less frequently from my perception, and it's less likely to have a full Highway 41 closure than what the bridge used to be. So I can remember one time in the last several years where it's happened to be a winter snowstorm, the bridge was iced over, but it doesn't happen as much as it used to, it seems. Maybe once a year. I mean, if that, it could be 0 times a year.
Okay, thank you for answering my questions. Again, I don't want to monopolize this. Any other board member have a question for Mr. Collins, Lieutenant Harris, or anyone else?
Hey, Dan, Jim Staple. Yeah, I basically agree with you. I think leaving it the way it is what makes sense right now. If I'm remembering the study correctly, we're pretty close to the maximum capacity of the street right now with the average they had, and they're talking about adding over 1,000 homes to the north of there over the next 20 years. And it seemed to me that the accident potential was not hugely out of line with what was happening. And we did fix a lot with the New York intersection. You're right about getting in and out of the driveway. I live on Church Ave, and I do have to stop every time because I actually have to go backwards to get into my driveway because of the angle on the street. And it's one lane each direction, and so that means I'm stopping everything when I do that. So that's my opinion.
Yeah, okay, Ross.
It looks like, Ross, when you're done, it looks like Jake wants to speak as well.
Okay, okay, well,
Let Jake go.
Jake, go ahead.
Thank you. I noticed that the consultants recommended 2A, and I can see the benefits of the slowing the roads and more traffic being able to turn left lanes and more snow storage. But what were the findings of the consultants why they chose 2A?
Basically, the reason that they're recommending 2A is because based on the feedback they had received throughout the public input process, that was the one that, and I can bring that up again, but that was the one that addressed the most issues the best. And those issues were the speed was number one, but then also the noise and the snow storage. So they felt that option best addressed the concerns that they heard at all the meetings. And I don't know, Alexa, if you want to add anything or.
Yeah. So do you want to pull up that one chart that you had up before that has the benefits and advantages?
Yeah, let me share that.
So the criteria that they listed for all three alternatives were vehicular reserve capacity, safety, vehicular speeds, pedestrian accommodations, snow storage, driveway access, noise, public comment, and then cost. So 2A checked the highest level for most of those, except for the top one, vehicular reserve capacity. That was a lower positive impact.
Yeah, and what, well, I'll just, and I put it in the report, but, obviously you guys can continue discussing, but staff's recommendation is to look at a phased approach. So phase one would be we would implement option one next year, and I believe that's what the community development has budgeted, installing speed feedback signs, and then we could get some evaluation of how effective that option was before considering option 2A or 2B. So that was our thought.
All right, okay, back to me, please. According to Ross, according to the consultants, it is mentioned that this is a very flat growing traffic pattern. It's flat. The Northeast Planning Commission said the fact is that the growth is at a 0.5%. Now, to do things in stages, you're keeping the confusion going for a longer period of time. And the problems exist, as I said, from one end to the other, for all the people going in and out of driveways, for all the snow removal. If you ever watch what's going on, cars don't not only move over while you're trying to do the snow, they won't even slow down. And you don't have a 5-foot buffer. And you have you have all those driveways and all those homes. It occurs all the way the full stretch. You got to do the whole thing at once so the confusion is over.
Yeah, and I can try. So it is. This kind of speaks to Mr. Staples' point, was that it depends on what criteria you look at. Here's a slide the consultants provided that just shows, for what we're looking at street redesign, some volume examples, some cities that have done it and what their ADT, average daily traffic, what that is. So currently on Jackson near Murdoch, we're towards the upper end of what WISDOT uses as a recommendation is 17,500. However, we're under what the Federal Highway Administration recommended at 20,000. If I remember correctly, we were around 18,000 with a slight increase in traffic over the next 20 years. We would still be between the 17.5 and 20, if I remember correctly. So they're saying that it would be that it would.
Oops. I didn't do it. Whoops.
So I think I don't know if we've heard from everyone. I believe, let's see, we've heard from Ross, Bill, Dan, Jake, and Jim. So yeah, I think we've heard from all the board members over here. But yeah, I'll leave it to you guys to continue on.
Can you go back to the chart you had up at Alexa's request?
Yeah. It's difficult because when I share my screen, I haven't figured out exactly yet. It minimizes my WebEx screen, so I can, like, you guys are all really small, and I can only see the screen I'm sharing, so it's hard to go back and forth. But there you go.
That obviously, for its purpose, gives us the most amount of information, pros and cons, one option versus the next. So hence the reason I actually have it put up. I think the thing to take note of, Ross does raise a good point. I mean, if we're going to rip the Band-Aid off, we should rip the Band-Aid off and do it all at once. I think there's some merit to that philosophy. But I still go back to my earlier point, which is we can solve most of the problems that we're supposedly here to solve, particularly between Church and Murdoch, by going with option one, which is status quo, and putting a little more enforcement into that area. Now, I know that may increase the budget at OPD a little bit, but I would hope we could get creativity out of them. We'll say a CSO park there. Now, they may or may not have enforcement powers, Lieutenant Harris. I'm not sure. But just some visibility there, I think, may solve some of our speed issues. If that becomes, I know officers have their favorite spots to park around town. You can almost count on an officer being in a certain location every day unless they got something else going on, from my observations driving around town. So I guess all I'm suggesting is that we make one of the side streets off of Jackson the frequent have to do paperwork for various officers on a regular basis. Does that make sense, Lieutenant Harris?
No. Come on, Harris, back us up here.
Yep, I mean, we do monitor that. I know, like I said before, the district sergeants, that's typically one of their selective traffic enforcement. It is kind of the borderline between several districts, so it actually probably gets a little more attention than some other locations in the city because it is part of several different districts. But I can definitely relay that to the patrol shifts too, that, you know, increased enforcement is requested. I know they already know that it is a high priority area though too, so we can reiterate that in any assessments. I know a lot of our traffic grants that are assigned out. The Jackson Murdoch area is always one of the assigned areas, so it does get attention, and it can definitely stay on our radar for attention in the future.
Thank you. The other question I had specifically, I suppose, potentially for, again, you, Mr. Collins, and potentially Lieutenant Harris, the speed boards that are proposed to be in place or put into place, is there any availability on those speed boards to capture the offender? I know it becomes an enforcement issue. You can't enforce by camera, but can you warn via camera?
That I don't know. I guess I don't know, Lieutenant Harris, if you know anything further about that.
We have one board and we have two trailers. They don't have the, call it pixels, the quality image that are going to capture any plates. So we would not be able to use them for enforcement.
Yeah, and I know that even if, I don't know if that's available, but if it was, I know there's some legal concerns with doing that, like you said, for as far as citations and things like that. I know there's issues with that.
The whole thing.
Warnings, I'm not sure. I know that last time we talked to the chief about that capability at traffic signals, and there were serious concerns about whether that was actually citations issued in that manner could be held up in court. So I don't know the details. I just know that he wasn't in favor of that.
And I'm fully aware that enforcement becomes an issue with cameras, but again, it was specifically to, can we just send them a letter that you were observed, be warned from here on.
Hey, Jim, if I may step in for just a moment, with the installation of the speed boards, we were looking at something not using the OPD inventory right now, but acquiring additional hardware that would be permanently mounted, correct?
Yes, yep, that's correct.
Inevitably, the question becomes, what's the potential expense for the add-on to make that happen, if in fact it can happen?
That we'd have to look into more. I don't know. I obviously we could find out, but I don't know off the top of my head.
Really expect you to know off the top of your head, but I think it's an interesting potential opportunity that we can make use of to keep costs down and still, again, solve the problem we're here to, with the exception of the driveway access issue. I fully concede that, but I think it's a rather creative solution to the existing problem, sans the driveway issue.
Yes, with the 5-foot buffer.
Yeah, 5-foot buffer would be great.
Well, yeah, I mean, people can swing out a little bit and while you.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any other questions of Mr. Collins, Lieutenant Harris, or anyone else for that matter? All right, then I'll need a motion or a second and a motion to move this forward to a vote if no one has any further questions.
Okay. Try again.
Okay,
Dan.
Dan, are you there? Hello,
Go ahead.
Dan. Oh, okay, thank you. We're talking about speed. We're talking about trying to curb the speed. And I think if we look at the driving world is made up of the roads, the drivers, and the cars. These are the three factors. You aren't going to change the cars. We can't go back to the Model A Ford in the 30s and so forth. You can't do anything with the drivers to any extent because the aggressiveness and the offensive driving and me, myself, and I in all those aspects. The one thing that pays off is changing the road, and that's why Road Diet has been given the nickname, the other nickname, traffic calming. It's practically done for you to a limited extent, and it helps the police force in their efforts to contain it. We have to look at the fact that some people will be inconvenienced a few minutes. That's nothing. When you watch road reports in traffic reviews in Milwaukee, sometimes the traffic flow adds 15, 20 minutes longer. Here it's in half a minute. It's not even measurable for the benefit you're going to get from the Road Diet. Amen.
Dan, are you looking? Sorry, are you looking for a motion, Dan? To I'd put one on the table to stay with option 1 and try the increased enforcement first to see if that gets the effect. Because in my mind, what we're about is balancing good moving traffic and safety. I mean, we could have perfect safety with making it a cow path, but that doesn't help. So we're trying to balance the two. So I'd put that on the floor as a motion.
One which I will gladly second. Any discussion on that?
Can you repeat the motion?
Sure, to stay with option one, which is leave things as they are, but request increased enforcement to see if that doesn't have the desired effect
No,
first.
no,
Okay.
no.
Yeah, and option one also would then have the speed feedback signs, just to be clear.
Thanks for the clarification. I appreciate that.
Okay.
And I'm okay with the speed boards. I mean, it would be nice if we could use them more effectively and let people know we know that they were speeding without an enforcement consequence necessarily. But I'd like to take this step by step. Again, I do realize it's less painful to rip the Band-Aid off all at once, but we're talking about a major traffic disruption to make all this happen over a 4-month, 5-month construction season. So I prefer to proceed a little more slowly on this one. So anyway, there's a motion on the table. Again, any discussion related to the motion that sits
Okay.
on the table?
All right. Go ahead.
Just an interesting fact that when we started our organization, Jackson Street, one of the things we asked for to have permission to do speed boards, and that we'd get a grant, or we had people that would buy them, and it was poo-pooed by the city because they would have to maintain and the batteries and the mounting. And so we were turned down on that, which we wanted to do 5 years ago. Now you're introducing this as a remedy. It's just a Band-Aid approach. You have to change the road design in order to produce the results we need for safety. Not just speeding, but safety.
Thanks for the input, Ross. Again, I'd like to call this. If this motion fails, we can move on to the next motion, which I would assume would be the adoption of 2A or 2B. But let's take this again one step at a time. So if there's not any further comment on the motion on the table, I'm inclined to call the roll on the motion that sits on the table. Last call for any comments on this particular motion. All right, can the roll be called for the motion that sits on the table for option 1?
Staple?
And the request for additional enforcement.
Oh, sorry. Staple?
Aye.
Krause?
No.
Wanschneider?
No.
Becker?
Aye.
Christensen?
Oh,
So I believe the motion does then fail. So I would look to someone other potentially than myself or Mr. Staple to propose an alternative.
I'd like to make a motion to use 2A as our suggestion to the city council.
yeah, well, I will second that motion. Bill Christensen here.
Jim, can you bring up the chart again so we can all be fully apprised of what the pros and cons are for option
Thank
2A?
you, Jake.
Yep. I will.
After comes some of this.
You see it?
Anyone have any questions for Mr. Krause or Ross or Bill? I don't know which one of you actually seconded that motion. It's hard to tell since you're both using the same connection, but any questions?
This is Bill Christensen. I seconded the motion.
And the question is, are there any questions for either one of you or any further clarification that needs to be had from anyone before we call the roll on 2A?
I made the motion because if you look at the pros to the option 1A or 2A, all those things are problems on that street right now, and if those could be directed and corrected, that would obviously be the correction I would want to make.
And not to belabor the point, Jake, I don't disagree with you that those problems need to be solved. I just think there's a more efficient way to do it that promotes safety throughout the city, gives us extra law enforcement presence as well. But I'm willing to listen if someone can convince me that 2A is reasonable and worth the roughly $200,000 it's going to cost to make that happen compared to a small amount of extra salary and benefits for some officer time.
Yeah, like I've said, with the safety as being the most important, having a police officer there once or twice a week maybe might help in those moments, but it's throughout the whole day. The less traffic on that road, the faster the people go. I've seen that myself. When there's a lot of traffic, people play drag racing. So, I mean, the traffic has to be corrected, the speeds, if the snow removal for the residents, quality of life back in our other driveways, it's important. I mean, we've talked about the confusion factor. We did 9th Avenue up by Kohler. We changed the lanes around and people, I've had a lot of feedback that that's been better too. So a little confusion for the long term is okay in my book.
Anyone else with any comments on the motion on the table to adopt option 2A?
Yeah, this is Jim Staple, and I may have been misunderstanding the report, but what I saw was that the safety they were talking about didn't look like it was all that out of the ordinary for a street. That carried a lot of, the number of crashes per 100,000 or million or whatever statistic they used. And I think we're about, and of course everybody wants safe streets, but I think we've got a balance is getting people to and from places in Oshkosh and safety. And I think there are better ways to do that we can keep the capacity. And, that obviously there were two of us that thought that, but that's my concern with this, that Main Street had its capacity cut significantly. Wisconsin doesn't have a ton of capacity. What's left going north and south in Oshkosh? So that's my only thoughts.
Anyone else wish to throw in their 2 cents? All right, seeing none, I'm going to ask that the roll be called On the motion that sits on the table for the adoption of option 2A as laid out on the screen before us.
Staple,
No.
Krause,
Aye.
Wanschneider,
Aye.
Becker,
No.
Christensen.
Aye.
Which then brings us to the motion being passed. Option 2A will be forwarded to the city council for their action in a future city council meeting.
Yep, so if, let me just look at my calendar quick. So if, so obviously your recommendation will go to the council, and then Alexa's Bike and Pedestrian Committee is taking this up on, is it this Thursday or next Thursday?
It's next Thursday. So next Tuesday is, well, Plan Commission is just for the north section. And then next Thursday is Bike and Ped
Okay,
Council in December.
okay, and then council will be on December 8th. So I just wanted to bring that up. If anybody watches this and you have any questions, concern, comments, recommendations, you will have 2 more opportunities. One would be at the Bike and Pedestrian Committee meeting, which will be next Thursday, which would be looks like the 19th at 4 p.m. And then ultimately the city council will take this up and possibly make a decision on their preference, their direction to staff on December 8th. So that would be the final decision point potentially. If any public or any board member, anybody else wants to add any input or comments to the council, that would be the appropriate time. And as always, you can always, as Mr. Becker said at the start, you can always contact your council members at any time as well to give input.
Which then, if I'm not mistaken, brings us to staff statements.
I only have one today, and I just wanted to update you. We haven't met in a couple months, but the South Main Street restriping that was planned for and laid out to this board as well as council from 8th, so South Main Street from 8th to South Park, where we were potentially going to restripe that to 1 lane in each direction with parking. That is still the plan. However, when the Wisconsin DOT reviewed that, being that it's interconnected highway, they requested a traffic operational analysis be done prior to giving their stamp of approval. So the city has hired Kale Engineering, who's done some other traffic analysis work for us, and they're currently working on that. So they should have their report done probably within the next month or 2. But if the report shows that there's no major concerns and WSDOT stamps or gives their stamp of approval, then we'll plan on proceeding with that next spring, early summer, once that's all done. I anticipate they probably will based on what I've seen, but it's never a bad thing, I guess, to have more data and to make sure that everything's going to happen as we anticipate it.
Will a copy of that be forwarded to this group, Mr. Collins?
Yeah, yep, we can do that.
Which then brings us to, unless anyone else has questions on that, to potential future agenda items. Anyone have anything?
Is it on the book somewhere? Between New York and Penn?
We have a comment. Ross has a question.
Oh. As we're talking about other streets, I was just wondering if there's anything on the books to improve the roadbed along Wisconsin Avenue between New York and Penn Street.
Wisconsin Street between New York and Bent is certainly on our radar as we work on the capital improvement program. I believe right now we're currently anticipating maybe about year 5 or 6 in the 5-year CIP as we're trying to schedule all of our projects. We had submitted that for the DOT one-time multimodal local support funding about a year ago. Obviously, we did not receive funding, so we are continuing to plan to reconstruct that with local funds.
Okay. Yeah, it's really getting tough. I mean,
Anyone else with a potential future agenda issue or item? All right, that being the case, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Roll call will have to be done because we are a virtual meeting, but I do need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion to adjourn.
just so it gets done.
I will second that.
Okay.
And then Jane, if you would be so kind as to call the roll on the motion to adjourn.
Staple,
Aye.
Rousey,
Aye.
Schneider,
Bye.
Becker,
Aye.
Christensen.
Hi.
That's Jay.
Yeah, Jane Cross.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Okay, all right.
Take care.